They said it like I wasn't even in the room. She's just a burden now. I had just blown out the candles on my 74th birthday cake. The laughter had died down. The grandkids had eaten too much frosting. I was still sitting at the end of the long dining table in Rachel's house, my daughter, trying to soak in what little warmth I could from this small celebration. It wasn't lavish, not like birthdays used to be. I didn't expect much. I didn't ask for much. Just a small cake, a few kind words, and maybe a card from the grandkids. But then I heard it. It came from Savannah, my oldest granddaughter, 16, glued to her phone. She leaned toward Rachel and muttered the words like they were a casual observation. She's just a burden now. Just like that. No emotion, no shame. And Rachel didn't correct her. She didn't flinch. She just nodded, like the words had been said before. I sat there, trying to process whether I had imagined it. But then I saw Rachel glance at me, not in surprise, but in discomfort. She knew I heard. The rest of the room went quiet. Forks froze, mid-air. My younger grandson, Oliver, looked up from his plate, but didn't say anything. No one did. No one stood up. No one said, "That's not true." They just carried on. Rachel got up to clear the dishes, pretending she hadn't just allowed her teenage daughter to reduce me to nothing more than a chore. I sat there, staring at the half-melted candle wax dripping onto the cake I had bought for myself earlier that day. They forgot to pick one up, said they were too busy. I'd spent the morning folding laundry that wasn't mine, feeding the dog, and cleaning up after breakfast while they rushed off to their yoga class. That night was supposed to be a celebration, a reminder that I still mattered. Instead, it felt like a farewell party. No one told me I was attending. I pushed the cake away, feeling my stomach twist. I wasn't hungry anymore. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? Was I not the one who stayed up with Savannah when she had night terrors at 6 years old? Was I not the one who paid Rachel's mortgage for 2 years after her husband lost his job? When did I become a burden? Is that all I am now? An extra mouth, a faded picture of the past they no longer care to look at. That night, I went upstairs to the guest room, the same room where they kept storage bins in old sports gear, and sat on the edge of the bed with the party hat still on my head. The laughter downstairs had returned. I was no longer part of it, and for the first time since my husband James died, I felt like I truly had no one. But I wasn't broken, not yet. Something had changed inside me. Something quiet, steady, and unshakable. And that change would rewrite everything that came next. Before all this, before I was just a burden, I was someone people leaned on. My name is Marjorie Lane. I'm 74 years old, a widow, a mother of 2, a grandmother of 5. And for most of my life, I thought I had done everything right. I married young. James Lane was my first and only love. We were married for 41 years before cancer took him. Quietly, quickly, he died in the same house we built together. The one with the stained glass window in the hallway and the sunflowers that bloom every August in the backyard. That house was my life. It held every laugh, every scar, every sleepless night and handwritten letter. After James passed, I stayed. I couldn't bring myself to leave. My daughter Rachel was always the strong-willed one. She was never cruel, not openly, but she liked control. She married well, lived in a big house, and always cared what the neighbors thought. She used to call me every day. After James died, it became every week. Then, only when she needed something. Babysitting, alone, or someone to take Savannah to cheer practice. Then there's my son, David, gentle as a boy, distant as a man. He moved to Chicago and built a life so full of work that I was lucky to get a birthday call. He loves me, I think, but from a distance, as if closeness costs too much now. It wasn't until last winter that things really shifted. I slipped on the kitchen floor. Nothing dramatic, just a fall. Sprained my wrist, scared myself more than anything. Rachel insisted I move in, for a while. She said it would help everyone. I wouldn't have to cook or worry. I could be close to the grandkids. And I believed her. I sold the house, my house, to help them refinance their mortgage. They said they'd use part of it to remodel the guest room into a space just for me. It's been 8 months. The room still smells like damp cardboard and dog toys. I've become an extra, not a guest, not even quite family. More like someone you tolerate because you owe them something. And that debt wears thin over time. I gave up my home, my garden, my quiet mornings. I gave up my routines, my privacy, my ability to lock a door and feel like the space behind it belonged to me. And in return, I became the unpaid housekeeper, the emergency babysitter, the invisible. No one asks how I'm doing. They ask what I can do. Can you pick up Oliver from soccer? Can you watch the dog while we go on vacation? Can you stay home while we have people over? Even when they said thank you, it felt hollow, like saying it was just part of the ritual. Not real gratitude. Sometimes I'd sit with Oliver while he did his homework. He's the youngest. Still kind, still looks me in the eye. He'd ask me to read to him, and I'd feel like I mattered again, if only for those 10 minutes. But when he left the room, silence returned, like fog, heavy, slow, empty. Rachel would pass by and not notice I'd been sitting there for hours. She'd sigh if I didn't clear the dishes fast enough, or correct me in front of the kids. Mom, don't say that. It's not how we parent now. I didn't want to be a burden, but I also didn't want to be erased. I gave everything, my money, my time, my love, and it bought me a corner of a house where my name wasn't even on the mailbox. And then, on that birthday night, I heard the truth they'd been thinking all along. It didn't start that night, but that was when I stopped pretending it was love. The morning after my birthday, Rachel was already moving on. She was in the kitchen on a call with someone from the bank, talking about interest rates. She didn't ask how I slept. She didn't mention the comment Savannah made. It was like nothing had happened, but it had. That sentence, "She's just a burden now," clung to my skin like smoke. I kept waiting for someone to acknowledge it, to apologize, to explain. But nothing came. Later that week, I overheard something even worse. I was folding laundry in the upstairs hallway when Rachel's voice drifted up from the living room. She was on speakerphone, talking to David. She's slowing down. It's starting to be too much. I know she gave us money, but honestly, Dave, she can't live here forever. There was a pause. David responded, casually. Yeah, I've been thinking about assisted living options near her old place. Maybe that's better for everyone. Better for everyone. Like I was a piece of clutter they couldn't figure out where to put. I stood there, holding a pair of Oliver's socks in my hand, my heart thudding in my chest. They had talked about this, planned it, without even telling me. That night, I asked Rachel gently if she wanted me to consider moving out. Her response was clipped, like she had rehearsed it. "We're not trying to hurt you, Mom. But you've got to admit, this isn't sustainable. The kids are stressed. I'm stressed. You're not the same anymore. Not the same." I didn't even know what that meant. Was it because I moved slower? Because I forgot things sometimes? Because I wasn't useful enough? She continued, almost with relief. I've looked into a place nearby. They have activities. You'd have people your age. I looked at her across the kitchen island. My daughter, the girl I rocked to sleep, who cried in my lap after her first heartbreak, who I helped raise children of her own. She was looking at me like I was a liability, like she had already decided. When I didn't respond, she softened her voice. You'd still be part of everything. Holidays, birthdays. We'd visit all the time, but I knew how that story ended. I had seen it before, in neighbors, in friends. Promises made and slowly broken. Visits that grew fewer. Holidays spent alone with a plate of mashed potatoes and a nurse in a Santa hat. Later that evening, I found Savannah in the living room, curled up watching TV. I sat next to her and said, "Hey, can I ask you something?" She shrugged. "Sure," I said. "Do you remember what you said at my birthday?" She blinked. "What? About what?" "You said I was just a burden." She didn't flinch. I didn't mean it like that. It's just, Mom's tired a lot, and you need help all the time now." It wasn't said with hate. It was worse than that. It was said with indifference, as if that view of me had always been there, just never spoken out loud. I went back upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed again, and stared at the walls. I didn't cry this time. I didn't even feel angry. I felt something colder, still, like something inside me had stopped asking to be loved the way I used to be. I realized then that the people I trusted most had already packed me away in their minds. They were just waiting for the right moment to finish the job. And maybe I had been making it easy for them, but not anymore, because if they were so ready to decide my life for me, they were about to learn how little they really knew about what I had left to give or take away. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the ticking of the old wall clock, the only sound in the room. Tick, tick, tick. Each second passing, like a little reminder that time was moving forward, with or without me. I got up around 2 a.m., careful not to make noise, and padded down the hallway in my socks. The house was still. Rachel's family had gone to bed hours earlier. I walked past the gallery wall of photos in the hallway. Vacations, school events, smiling faces. Not a single one included me. Not one. I ended up in the kitchen, sitting in the same chair where I'd cut up apples for Oliver's lunchbox that morning. The plate was still in the sink. No one had noticed or cared. I made a cup of tea I didn't want and sat in the dark, fingers wrapped around the warm mug, just thinking. Was this what it all came down to? You give your life to your family. You carry them, feed them, fight for them. And in the end, they put you somewhere safe and call it love. I thought of James, his laugh, the way he used to kiss my forehead when I was upset. He wouldn't have let this happen. He would have seen it. But he was gone, and I had let my grief make me smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. I remembered something strange in that moment. James had once said to me, during the hard months of his illness, "Don't ever give away your power, Marge, even to family, especially to family." At the time, I thought he meant decisions about his treatment, or maybe money, but now I wondered if he had seen something I hadn't yet. I stood up, went to the guest room, and pulled open the old suitcase I hadn't unpacked fully. At the bottom, buried under a stack of winter scarves, was a small fireproof lockbox. I hadn't opened it since before I moved in. I took it to the bed and sat down. My hands shook a little as I unlocked it. Inside were papers, wills, bank forms, copies of old letters, the kind of paperwork you keep, not because you look at it often, but because it matters when it matters most. There was a sealed envelope with my name on it in James's handwriting. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a short letter, dated 2 months before he died. Marge, if you're reading this, something has probably gone sideways. I trust you to make good choices, but just in case, don't let anyone take what we built. Not out of guilt, not out of love. People change when money's involved. Protect yourself. You've earned the right to live the way you want. Love you always, James. I read it 3 times. Then I pulled out the folder with my will in it. The last version I'd signed was from 5 years ago. Rachel was listed as my executor. David had financial power of attorney. The house was already gone. The rest, still theirs, still under their control. A kind of sharp clarity cut through the fog in my chest. They didn't just see me as a burden. They saw me as done. A chapter to close, a line item. And the worst part was, I had let them, but I wasn't finished. Not even close. I wasn't going to sit quietly while they made decisions about my life behind closed doors. They thought I was too old to matter. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The next morning, I woke up before anyone else. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the birds outside beginning to stir. I sat on the edge of the bed with James's letter in my hand. Something inside me had settled overnight. Not rage, not even heartbreak anymore. It was something steadier, focused. I wasn't going to beg for space in a life I helped build. I wasn't going to sit at the edges of my children's lives while they planned my disappearance behind my back. I was done handing over pieces of myself to people who didn't see me. I called my old lawyer, Meredith Cole, from the guest room. She picked up on the second ring, still brisk, sharp as ever. "Marjorie," she said, "you're up early. I need to change my will," I said, "and I need to do it without my family knowing. Can you help me with that?" There was a pause. Then her voice changed, lower, serious. "Tell me everything." By the end of that day, I had appointments scheduled, quiet ones. No one knew. While Rachel took Oliver to soccer and Savannah locked herself in her room to complain about her phone bill, I was quietly rewriting the rules of the game. The first step was power of attorney. I revoked both Rachel's and David's. They didn't even know they had lost that control yet. Next, I went through every financial document I had access to. Joint accounts, automatic transfers, shared policies. I moved what I could into a private trust account under my sole name. The rest, I froze. I had just enough left from the house sale to make it count. I also updated my will. Rachel and David were removed as primary beneficiaries. Instead, I named someone else, Nina Patel. She was my post-operative nurse when I fell last winter. Young, yes, but kind. She talked to me like a person. She listened. She never treated me like I was fading. She visited twice since then, just to check in. I remembered her telling me once, "You still have a whole lot of say in your life, Marjorie. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." That stuck with me. I called her that evening. When she picked up, I could hear the TV in the background and the rustle of potato chip bags. I asked if she had time to meet for tea that weekend. She said yes, surprised, but warm. I didn't tell her everything yet, but I would. That week, I started putting together documents for a small educational trust, one that would go to the library I'd worked at for 20 years. I wanted the kids in town, ones without much, to have access to books, to tutors, to a place where someone believed in them. Not because I wanted revenge, but because if I was going to give the last chapters of my life to anyone, it would be to people who actually needed it. All the while, I smiled. I made dinner. I folded towels. I let Rachel believe everything was just as it had been. She still rolled her eyes when I asked questions, still corrected my tone in front of the kids, still left me off group texts. She didn't know the ground beneath her had already started to shift. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm. And that kind of calm, that quiet, deliberate calm, is the kind people never see coming. It happened on a Thursday. Rachel had gone out for a wellness retreat weekend with some friends. David was back in Chicago. The kids were at school. The house was still. I stood in the hallway for a long time, just looking around at the walls, the furniture, the pieces of a life I was no longer a part of. Then, I started moving. I packed only what mattered. James's letters, a few clothes, the watercolor set I hadn't touched in years, and the lockbox. I left the rest. The furniture, the china I gave Rachel as a wedding gift, the framed family photo from a decade ago. I left it all behind. I didn't need it. Those things belonged to a life that didn't exist anymore. By noon, a small moving van arrived. I had hired it the day after I changed the will. They were quick, efficient, and kind. No one asked questions. They loaded my things while I quietly wiped down the countertops and left a note on the fridge that simply said, "You don't have to worry anymore. Love, Mom." I didn't owe them anything more than that. I moved into a small apartment across town. 1 bedroom, a little porch. It was quiet, but it was mine. Mine alone. No one sighed when I walked into a room. No one made me feel like a guest overstaying her welcome. Nina met me that evening. She brought dinner, Thai noodles and tea, and hugged me tighter than either of my children had in years. "I didn't know things were that bad," she said softly, sitting across from me on the floor. "You always seemed so composed." "I had to be," I said, "until I didn't." We sat there and ate like old friends. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge. She just listened. And when I handed her the envelope with my new will and trust documents, she looked at me stunned. "I can't take this," she said. "You already did," I replied. "The moment you treated me like a human being." She cried. I didn't. The next morning, I closed the last joint account Rachel and I shared. The letter went out that same day, certified mail, to let them know. I also revoked access to the shared family storage unit, where I had paid rent for the last 4 years. My name was on the account. I ended it. By the weekend, Rachel returned home to a version of her life that no longer included me. She called 6 times. I didn't answer. Then she sent a text. "You left? Just like that?" I stared at the screen and thought about it. Yes, just like that. I didn't reply, because the part of me that used to scramble to explain myself, to soften every truth, to be the version of me they preferred, that part was gone. She thought she had power. So did David. But power only lasts as long as someone else agrees to give it to you. And I had taken mine back, quietly, entirely. It didn't take long for the storm to come. By Monday morning, Rachel was outside my new apartment. She hadn't even knocked, just stood by the door, waiting like she still expected access to my life by default. I opened it slowly. She looked different, rattled. Her sunglasses were still on, but her voice was sharp beneath the surface. "Mom, we need to talk." I stepped aside and let her in. Not because I had to, because I wanted her to see what peace looked like. The apartment was small, but full of light. A soft breeze came through the screen door. A pot of tea was already on the table. Rachel didn't sit. "What is this? You just left? You cut off the accounts?" I looked at her, steady. "I left because you made it clear I wasn't welcome. You said it. Savannah said it. You all thought I didn't hear." Her mouth opened, but I kept going. And then I heard you talking to David about assisted living, about moving me out, as if I wasn't part of the conversation, as if I was a problem to solve. That's not what we meant, she said quickly. You took it the wrong way. We were just stressed. You know things have been tight. I didn't flinch. You used the money from my house to pay off your mortgage. Her face tightened. She didn't deny it. I sold my home to move into yours. You promised me a place in your family. But what I got was a utility role. Cook, babysitter, background noise. She crossed her arms. So you give everything to some nurse? Some stranger? Nina is not a stranger, I said quietly. She treated me with more kindness than my own daughter. Rachel laughed, cold, sharp. You're being manipulated. Number I was manipulated. By you. There was a long silence. She looked around the room, probably expecting to see some sign of weakness. A pile of unopened bills. A suitcase by the door. Anything that would tell her I wasn't serious. But all she saw was calm. You can't just cut us out, she said finally. We're your family. No, I said, standing. Family doesn't treat you like a burden. Family doesn't make plans to get rid of you while smiling to your face. I handed her a folder. Everything Meredith had prepared. Revocation forms, legal updates, a copy of the new will. Every document was in order. Every signature notarized. She stared at it, speechless. I'm not doing this out of spite, I said. I'm doing it because I refuse to spend what's left of my life being disrespected by people I gave everything to. Her eyes filled. Maybe with guilt. Maybe just with panic. Then, a last swing. Do the grandkids mean nothing to you? I felt that one. Deep. But I had my answer ready. They'll grow up. They'll learn who people really are. Maybe one day they'll understand why I left. Maybe they won't. But I won't keep showing up to be erased. She didn't respond. She just stared at the folder in her hands, like it was a bomb that hadn't gone off yet. And then she left, just like that. No hug, no apology, just silence behind a slamming door. It was the first silence in a long time that didn't hurt. The silence that followed Rachel's visit wasn't empty. It was peaceful. For the first time in years, I woke up without bracing for someone else's needs. I made my own breakfast, played the radio, read the paper front to back without interruption. I painted for the first time in a decade. Nothing serious, just watercolor flowers, the kind I used to grow in my backyard, before everything became about everyone else. I kept to myself, mostly, but not in the lonely way I once feared. This silence wasn't a punishment. It was a choice. I started volunteering again at the local library. The smell of old books, the quiet scratch of pens on paper, it all came back to me, familiar, steady. I helped kids with reading assignments and watched their confidence grow in the exact same building where I once raised my own children to believe that words mattered. That irony never stopped stinging. But it didn't stop me either. Nina checked in once a week. She never asked for more than I offered. Sometimes she brought flowers. Sometimes we just sat in the sun. She was always kind, always present. Not in a way that made me feel like I owed her something, but in a way that reminded me I was still worthy of good company. One afternoon, she brought me a small notebook, hand-bound, with the words, "For the next chapter," embossed on the cover. "I thought you might want to start writing again," she said. "You always tell stories when we talk. Some of them are beautiful." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. I spent the next week filling it slowly, not with complaints, not with regrets, with memories, recipes, favorite poems, pieces of myself I wanted to preserve, not hide. I even included a few stories James used to tell, ones I didn't want the world to forget. One night, I sat on my little porch with a cup of chamomile tea and the sound of crickets humming in the background. The air smelled like pine and clean grass. I was alone, yes, but not abandoned. I thought about Rachel, about David, about the people I used to think would carry me into the last years of my life with grace. I thought about how wrong I was, but strangely, I didn't feel bitter. I felt whole. I had taken back something most people never realize they've lost: the right to define what your life looks like, even at the end. Before I went inside, I looked up at the stars and whispered something I used to say to James when we were younger, when we still believed time was endless. I'm okay now. And I meant it. A month later, I mailed out the last of the scholarship applications. It was a small fund, nothing earth-shattering, but it would be enough to help a few young people afford what I once believed in so fiercely: books, knowledge, a place to feel seen. I named it the Lane Literacy Grant, in honor of James and the quiet strength he carried. The day I received the first thank you letter from a student named Kayla, who wanted to be a writer, I sat at the kitchen table and cried, not because I was sad, but because finally, something I gave away felt like it went somewhere it belonged. I didn't tell Rachel or David. They never asked. I'd occasionally get short texts. Hope you're well. Kids ask about you. Let us know if you need anything. I never responded with anger. Just short replies. I'm doing fine. Hope you are too. I had no desire to reopen wounds. I didn't need to win an argument. I already had what I needed: peace. The people I thought would protect me tried to manage me instead. And when I finally stopped begging for room in their lives, I found a whole world waiting to welcome me, on my terms. One morning in early spring, I went out to the porch with a cup of coffee and watched the sun rise over the pine trees. A bluebird landed on the railing beside me. No fear in its wings, no hesitation, just stillness, presence. That was my life now. No drama, no pretending, no performance, just real, quiet moments that belonged entirely to me. I reached for James's picture on the side table and held it in my lap. You were right, I whispered. People do change, but so can we. I didn't need to explain everything that happened, not to anyone, because here's the truth I wish I'd known years ago. Respect is not something you earn with sacrifice. It's something you demand with self-worth. And love, real love, is never afraid of your voice. So I chose to use mine, finally, fully, and without apology. The world didn't fall apart when I stopped giving everything away. In fact, it finally came back to me. And that, more than any inheritance, any apology, any family name, was the gift I gave myself. The ending wasn't loud, but it was mine, and it was enough.